This is True Crime Stories. We focus on the facts.
The fraud that brought down the CEO of one of America's largest conglomerates did not start with a forensic accountant. It started with a shipping crate. In late 2001, investigators in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office began looking into a series of high-end art purchases. Paintings by Monet and Renoir, totaling close to $15 million, bought by a man named Dennis Kozlowski. Kozlowski was the chief executive of Tyco International, a sprawling conglomerate that made everything from electronic components to medical supplies, employed around 270,000 people, and operated in roughly 100 countries. The art itself was not the problem. The problem was that the paintings had been shipped on paper to Tyco's offices in New Hampshire, a state with no sales tax, while the actual canvases were quietly delivered to Kozlowski's Fifth Avenue apartment in New York. The crates that arrived in New Hampshire were empty. That detail, empty crates standing in for million-dollar paintings, was the thread investigators pulled. It was a small tax matter compared to what came after. By the time the thread was fully unspooled, prosecutors would allege that Kozlowski and his chief financial officer, Mark Schwartz, had looted as much as $600 million from the company they ran. Tyco, in the late 90s, had been a Wall Street favorite. Kozlowski had been with the company since 1975 and took over as CEO in 1992. Under him, Tyco grew through aggressive acquisitions. By early 2002, it had spent more than $8 billion on over 700 deals in a 3-year span. The stock climbed. The board was satisfied. And Kozlowski, in his own later words, was living in what he called a CEO-type bubble, with what he described as a strong sense of entitlement. Inside that bubble, 2 corporate programs would become the mechanism for what investigators called systematic theft. The first was the Key Employee Loan Program, a benefit designed to let executives borrow against the value of their stock options to cover taxes. The second was a relocation loan program meant to help Tyco employees who had to move when the company shifted offices from New Hampshire to New York and later to Florida. On paper, both were legitimate. In practice, according to the SEC, they became something else entirely. Between 1997 and 2002, Kozlowski drew approximately $270 million from the Key Employee Loan Program. About $29 million of that went to taxes, which was the program's actual purpose. The remaining $242 million, the SEC alleged, went to yachts, fine art, estate jewelry, luxury apartments, vacation estates, and personal business ventures. None of it disclosed to Tyco shareholders. Mark Schwartz did the same on a smaller scale. He took roughly $85 million in KELP loans, used about $13 million for taxes, and applied the remaining $72 million to personal investments and real estate. Kozlowski also drew more than $46 million from the relocation loan program, money meant for ordinary Tyco employees being asked to uproot their lives. And then, prosecutors said, the loans began to disappear. Kozlowski and Schwartz quietly forgave tens of millions of dollars of their own debts to the company, again without disclosure. Kozlowski awarded himself a $56 million bonus he never told the board about. Schwartz received $28 million on the same term. Some of where the money went became, by 2003, the most photographed inventory in American corporate history. There was a $30 million Manhattan apartment whose furnishings included a $6,000 shower curtain and by some accounts, $15,000 dog umbrella stands. There was an oceanfront estate on Nantucket. There was the Boca Raton mansion. There was a $2 million 40th birthday party for Kozlowski's wife on the Italian island of Sardinia in June of 2001. Toga-themed, with gladiators at the door. An ice sculpture of Michelangelo's David dispensing vodka, and a private concert by Jimmy Buffett. Tyco paid roughly half the bill. The party was logged internally as a shareholder meeting. The first crack in public was small. In January of 2002, questions began to surface about Tyco's bookkeeping. The stock dropped 19% in a single session. By June, Kozlowski had resigned, one day before being indicted by Manhattan prosecutors for evading sales tax on the art. By September, the district attorney, Robert Morgenthau, announced indictments against Kozlowski, Swartz, and the company's general counsel, Mark Belnick. The charges included grand larceny, conspiracy, and falsifying business records. Kozlowski was released on a $100 million bail. Swartz on $50. The first criminal trial, in 2003 and 2004, ended in a mistrial after a juror was reported to have made an apparent gesture of approval toward the defense, and then received a threatening phone call and letter. The second trial ran 4 months. On June 17, 2005, the jury convicted both men on 22 of 23 counts. Kozlowski and Swartz were each sentenced to between 8 years and 4 months and 25 years in state prison. The judge ordered them to jointly pay $134 million in restitution to Tyco. Kozlowski was fined an additional $70 million. Swartz, $35. In a separate civil judgment, a court applied New York's faithless servant doctrine and ordered Kozlowski to forfeit roughly $500 million in compensation and benefits he had received between 1997 and 2002. A class action settlement on behalf of cheated shareholders eventually paid out $2.92 billion. With Tyco's auditors at PricewaterhouseCoopers contributing another $225 million. Kozlowski served just over 6.5 years and was released on parole in January of 2014. What makes the Tyco case worth studying is not the shower curtain or the toga party. Those were the tabloid surface. The deeper pattern is structural. Two corporate programs that existed for legitimate reasons were modified internally so that the people who controlled them could draw down hundreds of millions of dollars in undisclosed loans, then forgive those loans to themselves, while a board of directors signed off on financial statements that never mentioned any of it. The auditors did not flag it. The compensation committee did not flag it. The thread that finally pulled the structure apart was not a whistleblower or an internal review. It was a sales tax investigation into shipping crates. There is a separate argument, made most prominently by the academic Catherine Neal, that Kozlowski was punished less for what he did than for who he was. A high-flying executive made into a public symbol in the wake of Enron and WorldCom, at a moment when prosecutors and the public were looking for one. Kozlowski himself, in his parole hearing in 2012, told the board that he had been living in a CEO bubble with a sense of entitlement. He has also said, more bluntly, in an interview after his release, that he had been a piggy. The question worth sitting with is this: if a fraud of this scale ran for 5 years inside one of America's largest public companies, with auditors and a board and a compensation committee all in place, what does that say about how many similar structures are still running right now in companies whose shipping crates nobody has thought to open? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this kind of breakdown is what you came here for, The subscribe button is right there.